Hi, I'm Corey. Welcome to Creating with Scraps. This video is part of the 100 Days of Junk Journaling Ideas, which is hosted by Rach and Bella Crafts. And here are the things I want to share first. I know you can read this, but I'll go over it super quick. Every day for 100 days, a video will be aired for the collaboration. Sometimes it'll be two because many people are doing this independently as well as with the collaboration. So you're going to see a lot more of this 100 days than just listed here. There will be a new junk journal related theme each week. So I believe last week's was pockets, and I don't have it in front of me, but it was pockets and something else. This week it is covers and binding and spine type systems, and on and on. So it'll be something each week, a different concept. You can find the schedule, and I will link it below at rachandbellacrafts.com. Schedule will be posted every 2 weeks, so that I think it's like 12, 13 weeks total, and which can be big and overwhelming. So she's posting the information every 2 weeks at a time so that it's not overwhelming and you can jump in anywhere you want. Every Saturday, Rach and Bella will do a freebie challenge video and do a weekly giveaway. And this freebies so far are phenomenal. There's some ephemera bits, there's background papers like a muted paper to put on the back of some of the other images if you want for cards or tags or whatever, but there's a lot, and they're found at her coffee page, K-O-F-I, Rach and Bella Crafts, K-O-F-I. Okay, and to enter, you must like all the videos and leave a comment. So in order to get into the videos, or into the prize drawings, you have to watch all of them and like and comment. And there's a way that they can tell that happens. Kits are on discount right now, and the kit is it's huge, just like Rachel always does, and it's absolutely gorgeous. If you like vintage and Victorian soft colors, it's absolutely lovely. And that's available on Rach and Bella's website, rachandbellacrafts.com. Again, that'll be listed below. And if you all just want to follow along and play, the hashtag is hashtag 100 days JJI. And if you're sharing something on one of your social media accounts, please do that. Now, I said she's posting 2 weeks at a time. So last week there were 7 people. Each week, I believe, begins with Rach and Bella. And then Scrapbooking with Me, Hilltop View, Fraps and Scraps, Melina Pliant. I'm not sure, I'm sorry. Kate in the Nest, Mimi's Keepsakes, Little Nest, Crafts Paper Bumblebee. Angela, G. Kerr, myself. Anyway, lots of people. I'll, try to put that up there so you can see. And some people are doing 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. Different people are doing different things at different times. So please be sure and check that out. Okay, so my video. I had intended to do a cover, and I did. I did a couple different covers. And my thought was to do a no-sew binding system, kind of like I've shared in the past with paper hinges. And I went to upload that video this morning, and I realized that Steph from Hilltop View Journals did the exact same thing. Now, I haven't watched all of her video, but I know that she used hinges, and she used the same system I was going to. So I went back to plan actually C at this point, and I'm doing a different kind. And because there's a lot of different ways to do the same thing, but I don't want anyone to compare or think, one way is better than another, or I don't know. I felt like there's a lot of spines and covers and systems that we could go over. So I thought I would do something different than what she had just done. And I didn't know she was doing it. One of the things about this is we don't really know what each other's doing until we see the videos. And my thing is I don't watch the videos prior to doing mine because I don't want to be influenced one way or the other about what I do. But here's a good reason to actually know what your other people are doing so you don't duplicate. All right, my first thought was I was going to show you, and I still will really, really briefly, how to just use what you have at home. This journal is a cereal box, and let me show you here real quick. A long time ago, I don't even know if it was that long ago, I had a shirt that I absolutely loved, and I wore it a lot. And it's got this net with these, daisy-type flowers on it. Gorgeous, but I tore the sleeve in a place where it couldn't be repaired. It was like a big hole on top. And I don't do tank top, so I thought I'd save it for a journal cover, which is what I did. And because it is sheer and thin, I wore a tank top, a pale pink tank top underneath it because it's a pale pink pattern. I don't know if you can see that or not. So I thought, well, gosh, this is the perfect project to use this on. So what I had originally intended, plan A, was showing you how to use, because this is just t-shirt cotton, so super, super, super stretchy, right? To show you how to use some of the iron-on fabric stabilizer, just iron it on, and then this stretchy fabric all of a sudden doesn't stretch anymore. So what I did was I used this iron-on, and here's another piece. Oh, I've got both kinds. Here's the iron-on kind. It's shiny on one side and flat, matte on the other, and I just ironed it on my cotton t-shirt. And then this kind is the kind that you sew in. If it's a little bit thicker stabilizer, I've shared that in the past. But you have options. And I bought mine at Hobby Lobby, but you can get it on Amazon or any fabric or craft store. All right. So I ironed it on, which was great because it holds that stretch that cotton has. And then what I did, so I ironed on the stabilizer to the cotton undershirt. Then I took a piece of the net overlay and I used adhesive spray. Now I used pixie spray because that's what I had, but you know, Elmer's or whoever's spray adhesive, I just lightly sprayed the cotton and then I laid down the net fabric right on top and I let it dry, and it doesn't take long at all. And it gave me this. So here's my iron on the cotton, right? And then here's my spray on, and I could peel it off if I wanted to, but it holds it in place, and it holds it in place pretty nicely. And this gave me the fabric that I used. That's what created the fabric to create this journal. And I thought, that's really pretty. And then I've got some vintage pink trim, and I thought I'd double wrap it, and that'd be really great. And I loved it until I put it up with the paper. It made me really stop and think about when I'm creating a cover, the cover has to kind of set the tone, I guess, for what's coming inside. And these papers that Rachel created in pieces are very Victorian, feminine. They're absolutely beautiful, in blues and pinks and creams and some yellow, and I think there's some green in there as well. They're gorgeous, but this is more like a country garden, daisy look, and it didn't work for me. And not that you couldn't do it, but the two didn't mesh for me. So I thought, okay, I'll go with plan B. And then I started to do a no-sew. I created a no-sew page inserts for the pages. And then I saw that Steph or Stephanie had done the same thing. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go with plan. Oops, sorry about that. I just knocked over something. Oh, well, it's on the other side. We don't need to see it. So then I went with plan C. And this is what we're going to show you today. So all that to show you, we're going with plan C. Now, when I create for these collaborations and such, and if I'm using digital kits, to be honest, a lot of times I'll put all of my pieces in a file folder or a Ziploc envelope just to keep them all together while I'm printing and while I'm deciding what I want to make and what I want to do. And at the very end of this collaboration, I asked Rachel if we could do creating with the leftover bits. So we've used our kit, beautiful, big, enormous kit, and we've got leftover pieces because we always do. I mean, everybody does. And I had several different things that I was going to share on how to make at the end. And I still will, but I'm just going to do it a little bit differently. And this is one of the pieces. And masterboards are a fabulous way to use things, but there's various takes on masterboards. For example, this is my inspiration for the cover that I'm actually showing you. Now, I made this a while ago. This is cereal box. This was a masterboard with leftover strips. I cut them into 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch. Man, 1/4 inch was a little narrow. Maybe 1/2 inch to 1 inch strips. And I laid them on paper. Now, in the one I'm showing you, I laid them on Tyvek because I wanted to sew it and I want it to be strong, and I'll show you why. And then I went in with some lace and just filled some of the gaps with lace to give just a little bit different look on a masterboard. So it's strips, and you can do it horizontally or vertically, doesn't matter. And sewed in those. You don't have to sew them. You can just glue and then maybe Mod Podge, or what I would probably do is Collage Matte Medium. Tim Holtz's Collage Matte Medium over the top. But in this case, I happened to sew it. And you can see I sewed directly on top. And I'll show you. We'll do this. We'll do the process super quick. I put the strips down, lightly glued them in place, and then I sewed them in place. If you don't want to sew, you don't have to sew. But you can see here the top is a raw edge, and that was intentional. The one we're going to make is a wrapped edge, so I'm going to show you both options. And I'll show you how to do the wrapped edge. But this is a raw edge because I really love the tatty business of the raw edge. But I also now know that not everybody does, so I'm going to show you this with the tatty edge, and then I'll show you how you can get a more smooth edge. So this is just the collage strips, or scrap strips, glued down to a piece of paper and then put on cereal box to make a quote-unquote masterboard, and in this case, a cover. So I'm going to show you how I did that. So that's where this cover comes from and where it was inspired. You can use a cereal box. You can use, let's see, what else do I have? Minute rice box. You can use barley box. You can use a Pop-Tart box. You can use any kind of box. And I sewed mine on Tyvek. Now this is just, I put it somewhere here. This is here it is, a Tyvek envelope that I cut. And because Tyvek, you can see here, this is the perforation part. Tyvek is incredibly hard to tear. So when I'm sewing on it, I don't have to worry about perforating the pages and being able to tear, which is one of the reasons I like using it. Plus, it's super thin and it's super strong. I use Tyvek frequently on spines and seams when I need something to be sturdy. So we'll use a piece of Tyvek to show you what I'm talking about regarding creating the strip collage. But this was an activity board packet that I got for my students. This was filler paper. This was the thin, it's not really, I guess it is chipboard, but really thin stuff that I got in filler paper. It doesn't have to be a box, a cereal box, but most of us have, if not cereal, some kind of something that came in a box, right? Here is a Lucky Charms box. This was in the bottom of something else that came. I don't know. These are some leftover bits. These are quite a bit thicker. So if you're wanting a heavy duty cover that lace came on, this was the Epsom paper that I get. So you don't have to go purchase anything. Oops, sorry about that. I hit my phone. There's plenty of stuff for you to use. You don't have to go out and purchase something for it. Now over here, I've got, I'll show you, here's my peanut butter Captain Crunch. Those are the best in Rice Krispie treats. Sorry, I'm going under because I spilled. Here is a huge Rice Krispie box, right? So a lot of times I will use, I don't know if you can even see that, the spine of the box will determine my width, but you don't have to. You know, I like a wider spine sometimes because it still fits around my hand really nicely, right? Smaller boxes of cereal or rice or what have you have smaller spines, but this is what I used. And you can also cut it and change it. So it's got a spine built in, it's scored for you if you want that size, but if you don't, just cut out this piece and then put the spine where you want. You want a 1-inch spine, use a scoreboard or a straight edge and make yourself a 1-inch spine and then fold each side. So you don't have to use it exactly the way it comes, is what I'm trying to say. All right, so paper, and this is just a piece of Tyvek, and I'll show you. I'm going to glue it right on there. Sorry, I have grand dog duty, and the monsters are digging in the backyard right now, so they've got to bark at everybody. Oh, here, this is one of the papers, the backgrounds that's free on coffee that I was talking about. Absolutely gorgeous, perfect for the backs of things. There's yellow and pink and green and blue, I believe. So I'm going to put these aside and I'll show you how I did it. And I've got it started so that we don't have to spend too terribly long. All right, I am going to show, I made a little journal because I really enjoy making little journals. This one's probably, I think it's 4x5, right? And the spine in here is, on this particular box, is just shy of 2 inches. So I'll show you how I did it. Okay, so let's start with that cover. Got all kinds of the pieces and such, so I can hopefully go fairly quickly. So I cut the cereal box, right? I undid the top and the bottom. I opened the top and the bottom, and you can see here, this one has a spine. Now, when you look inside, you'll see that I think you can see that there is an overflap, right? When I'm cutting these off, I usually cut off that side. And if I want this dimension for my spine, I'll just leave this side with no flap. So, and I save the extra bits, and I'll show you why. So I've got my cereal box. I decide how long I want it. And then you can use a straight edge and a ruler if you choose. You can, this one, let's see, maybe I'll make it 6 inches because that'll fit. I'm going to cut this piece off, and this is a little thin for what I need, so I would actually probably toss this. Sometimes the thicker tops work great. So you can see now I can push it flat either way. This is the side with the hinge, so I don't want to have that bulk in there on my spine, so I'm going to open that up. And then I'm going to cut it to the width that I want. Now you can see, to make it flat and to make sure I like what I'm doing, that I'm pleased with the end result, I open it up and lay it flat. And then I decide how wide do I want it? What is the width? I like 10 inches because paper is, 5 inches because that's half. So if I'm folding paper in half, I have a little bit extra, a little bit of wiggle room if I want to trim it down. So 5 is one of my favorite widths for a journal. So I'm lining this score mark, the spine score mark, up at 5, and I'm going to pull it straight down. Okay? And then I'll save these bits because I can use these pieces later. Then I will open it up, and this spine, the inside spine, the opposite side, see if I left it like this, it's off-centered. Now I could make another spine and fold it over if I wanted a closure that way, but for the sake of this simple journal, I am just going to cut it off. And I'm going to measure it the same thing. I'm going to take my seam or my crease or my fold, whichever you want to call it, line it up with 5. Can you see that? Sorry. Line it up with 5 and trim it. And the nice thing about that is, so now my cover is the same size, right? They match nicely. And this piece is the perfect size to put in here to make my spine a little thicker. I like a little bit sturdier spine, and all I have to do, it's already cut, it's ready to go. I glue it in. And that is what I'm going to do. You can use whatever, Fairly Art glue, art glitter glue, reptile glue. Oh gosh, I imagine you could use Fabri-Tac. I don't use it, so I don't really know, but I imagine you could because it's a fairly strong glue too. So I'm going to put quite a bit of glue on that. It's the chipboard, but it's thin chipboard. And then I'll fold this up and line it up against that seam. And then just like this. Now I would either clamp it. I use my magnets quite a bit to hold things in place because it's easy, right? It holds it while it dries and it's pushed down, and so all the glue is doing its glue thing. But if you don't have that or use that, a magnet board, you can use clamps of some kind, whichever kind you want. Because I want to let that dry for a minute or two. And I'll just clamp it down. This is a small size of a quilter's clip, and this is the larger size of the quilter's clip. The nice thing about these is when I need to clamp in between signatures, because I sew in generally a lot of signatures, it's got a really narrow, I don't know how well you can see that, really narrow profile, so it'll fit in between signatures. So I really like the little size too, but this is a standard size, and I think it's about a 1/2 inch wide. So I'm gonna make sure it's straight because that's kind of important. And then I'll clamp it and put it aside for a minute because I don't need to use this anymore right now. All right, so there is the base of my cover that I'm using for this. Okay, now these I will save because I can use these pieces for the inside, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So that's the outside of my cover, and the one I'm working on is this smaller one, this 5-inch one, because I wanted a little cutie. So it's the same exact idea. I did the same exact thing, but this is going to be my outer cover. And what I did was I prepped a little bit so that you didn't have to watch the entire start to finish process, but I will show you what I did. All right. First, I made the inside pieces. So I took some of this leftover chipboard, right? And I cut it. And I cut it, so like this one right here, I cut it for the spine. And I'll show you what I mean, because I'm going to show you this one to wrap. And it's just shy of 2 inches, so I'm going to go just a little shy so that it has room to fold, right? So I'm going to use this as my sample for you. And I just used a piece of this. I can also use that cereal box for these 2 pieces, right? These are, I do a 3-piece inside. My cover is solid, but I do a 3-piece inside as a general rule. I do what I call a spine insert, and I'll show you how I made that, a spine insert. This is one way. It's a little bit different than what other people have done, so that's why I wanted to show you. It's a spine insert, and this is where I am going to sew or glue my pages when they're ready to go. This is ultimately going to go right in the center of my covered completed journal, right? I'm going to have my pages there, and I'm going to put this right there in the middle, and that's going to be my spine for my signatures. I think I've got 7 signatures in here, and I like a little bit of space because I tend to make fat journals. If you're a person who makes thinner journals, then you don't need quite as much space. Personal preference. But I'll show you how I did this too. So I've got my spine insert once that's ready to go. And then I used that chipboard and I covered it with one of the background digitals from Rach's kit. And I glue this in, and then when it's all said and done, then I glue the cover panel in like this in the front. And then same thing on the back. I did a pocket in the front and a side tuck in the back just to mix it up a little bit. And I sewed on a little bit of lace. You don't have to sew, you can just glue. Now you can see I covered it with Tyvek, and I'll glue those together. But I wanted you to see, I just put Tyvek on the back because it's strong. This is not going to tear. I would glue my spine insert down with all my signatures and pages in it, or I don't have to put the pages in it, which is the real beauty. I can do that as I create. So if I want to sew something or make something bigger or smaller, this is one of the reasons it's one of my favorite systems, because it's very flexible. You get a base, you get a sturdy base, and then you can play with your pages as you go, rather than deciding on everything at once. And if you're going to sew something, you have to sew the edges or change the size prior to putting it into your signature in the book. This way allows me to make them outside of the book and then put them in. And I don't have to make all my decisions at once. I can make my decisions as I go. And then I glue this down, let it dry for a few minutes. Then I put this piece down, let it dry for a few minutes, put this piece down, let it dry for a few minutes. And then my journal is ready to go. Now that would be after I have my cover on, but I'll show you the cover. So see, that's kind of the principle of this. That's how it works. If I were wanting a wraparound kind of a tie, I can put it between the chipboard, our cereal box cover, and the book plate cover. So I can put it right in there if I were wanting to do a tie that way. I can always wrap it around. This is nice and sturdy if I wanted to put an eyelet in here, punch a hole that way. It's also great if I wanted to put a button on my front closure. I could put a button and then put a piece of the Tyvek over. I could put the cover on, put the button on, and sew it to the Tyvek, glue a piece of Tyvek and sew it, and then that button's not going to pull out, which is, again, really a nice option. So Tyvek scraps are great too. So spine, glue. Okay? So that is what it's going to look like when we're done. To make what I'm doing for the cover, I used that paper I showed you as my inspiration, and I grabbed a piece of Tyvek, okay, cut about an inch wider all the way around. So let's say my cover, I think my cover is 4 by 6. So then it would be 6 by 8. So I have an inch on each side and an inch at top and bottom. Because remember I said I wanted to roll this one rather than just chop it off at the top. And the nice thing about Tyvek is it's flexible enough to do that. And then I just printed this on Epson copy paper. It's not cardstock. So it is plenty thin to wrap and roll. All right. The way I created, this is my cover for the one we're creating today. And I'll show you how I did this. One thing to keep in mind, just personal preference. You can randomly cut strips, leftover strips, and glue them down. A lot of times if I'm going to have a solid piece like I've got here, I will cut either out of cardstock or a regular pattern paper. I will cut a little bit wider piece, one that will cover the spine and go a little bit down on each side, so that when I roll it, it doesn't fold at a crease where the paper joins. I'm guaranteed that it will roll on either side of it, so I don't have that worry about the seam popping. So just something to keep in mind for your center piece. If you don't want to worry about the seams popping up or ungluing, make your center piece a little bit wider, and put lace on it or not, that's completely up to you, so that it wraps around each edge of the page. That's kind of what I did here. And the way I did this, and you can see it's just all glued down pieces and then sewed. So, all right, I had a piece of Tyvek, and I had, this is going to be for the spine center, and I'll show you that in just a minute. This is for the spine center and the signatures. Okay. Got to get myself organized here. All right, I'll move all these. These are just extra bits of that Tyvek. I keep it around because little bits come in really handy. So if I were creating the cover, I would use a wider piece in the center, and that's where I would start. And I use my grid. I've got a piece of paper here now so that the glare from the lights doesn't reflect, but I use a gridded work surface. I can use a cutting mat or whatever to show you the same thing. But a gridded work surface, and then I make sure things are lined up straight on here. Now mine's magnetic, so I'll just take my magnetic bars, and this is so strong that it'll actually hold through this cutting mat, which is crazy to me. But I can make sure that I'm starting on a straight surface. Then I'll take a wider piece, one, like I said, that will be just a little bit wider than my center spine, and go over the edges. But for the sake of this, I'm just going to use this as a journal card, so it really doesn't matter. I chose random scraps of pattern paper, and the reason I did that is, rather than solid paper, is the glue doesn't show. Now, you can use whatever glue stick you like. That's fine. That'll work. You can also use art glitter glue, because I generally tend to sew mine. I like to use art glitter glue because I don't have to worry about the edges being down perfectly, because I'm going to go back in and sew them. So I'll come in on here, or I'll actually come in on the paper, the Tyvek itself, and I'll put a little bit of glue down. I don't need a lot. And if it's directional, I'll make sure I'm going in the correct direction. And this just happens to be 1 inch, so I can make sure I'm starting off straight. That way, I mean, if I wanted to go at an angle, I could certainly do that too. But for the sake of this, I wanted to start off straight. And then I just start picking randoms. Oh, no, that's too much blue right next to each other. I just pick the leftover scraps that I've got. Oh, I like the pink and blue next to each other. So I'll pick the random scraps. You can see they're different sizes. And I'll put down a little bit of glue. And I'll do this all the way. Oops. And that's one of the nice things about using lace afterwards. If you've got a little bit of a gap, the lace will hide those little bits of gap. And satin stitch does too. But I'll just glue it down like that. And let's see what else I've got. Oh, that's kind of pretty. I will put this. Now you can see I've got a little white edge there that I don't want. Well, I can either trim that off, or I can just make sure that I cover it up with my next piece. So you don't have to have perfect pieces. Oh, I like the script. So I'm going to put a little glue down and glue it into place. Now, if I were wanting to be super, super conscientious and not waste any bits or pieces of the length of this, sorry, I'm going to have to go get that monster in. Mo doesn't like people in the other yard. Mo is a Bernese mountain dog. He's one of my grand dogs, and he's not happy about something. All right, and you can see I'm just going to do the same thing over. I'll stop in just a moment. I'll put this one down and I'll finish this later. I don't know if that's directional or not, but I'm going to call it this way. And then I do that all the way across. And if they're not perfectly straight, it doesn't matter. Like I said, I can cover it up with, let's say I've got some scrap lace up here. I can cover it up when I'm done with a little bit of lace, right? So there's that gap right there. I can glue this down and then sew it on if I choose to. And that's exactly how I created the cover. All the way across, all the way down. And then the leftover bits I will use as journal cards or pockets or tags or something along those lines. So that's how this is created. And when it's all said and done, it looks something like this. Again, I like to sew. You do not have to sew. Just make sure that you're gluing it down completely, or you seal it when you're done with, and I'm sure there's other art mediums that'll work, but I'm just familiar with collage mat medium. And this is what it looks like. It's overlapped, it's not perfect, it's not straight, but I sewed them in place. Different stitches, different kinds of stitch. You don't have to sew. You can just leave it the way it is. Maybe I didn't sew this. Oh, I did sew it down. It's sewn. I was going to say, I make sure I sewed all of them down. Well, I don't know if that one is. It doesn't look like it's sewn. So I will pull over my machine and show you super quick what I do. And you can use a straight stitch. You can use a satin stitch. You can use any fancy stitch you want. Sorry, I'm going to have to adjust the arms so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. And then it's all said and done here, but you can see I didn't sew that. I just forgot one. So I'm going to put it down under my machine. And this needle is not a thick needle. I think it's a size 12. It's just a standard needle. This machine has thumb start and stop and reverse, but if you can use a foot pedal as well. And let's see, make it slower so you can see. And then I'm going to sew this down all the way. It doesn't have to be straight, doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just going to sew it down so it stays in place. I could have sewn it on each side so it doesn't bend, but this is going to be on the front cover of my journal, so it's not going to bend. That's not a bend spot. And that's it. Let me move that back out of the way. Sorry, there you go. There's that nasty light. Let's see if I can move this back up here. Okay. And you can see there, that's another way to double check that you're doing it the way you want. My next step is to cut it. Now, this is going to be my cover, right? And I told you I wanted this one to wrap. So when I cut it, all I'm going to do is I cut the Tyvek to the size that I wanted. So when I trim these extra bits off, I could have been precise when I was gluing it, but for the sake of speed, I just kind of overlapped it here and there. So when I trim this down, I'm going to trim exactly to where my Tyvek is, because the Tyvek was cut to be able to cover this. And you can use a straight edge, or this trimmer works really well. This is a Tim Holtz Tonic Studios. Some people love it, some people don't. I've had good luck with it, so I am not going to complain in the least. Push down, and I find the key with this is to push down on the handle. Now, because of the lace on there, it may not all trim off in the threads, so I can just come back in and trim that off easily. And I'll save those because who knows, those might be great clusters or embellishments on something else. All right, so I've trimmed that side down. I'll put this stuff off to the side, and then I'll trim this side down. Sorry, Mo is right out the window. I am sorry about that. He's got something to say, and people don't really want to sleep on a Sunday morning. I'm on the west coast of the U.S., so it's still morning here. I know some of you are much later, and I had intended to have your video out for the people in the U.K. at a much earlier time, but, you know, plans change. So I might save some of those little bits, or I might just toss them depending on how small they are. So now my cover is ready to wrap. All right. And yeah, I'll just leave this cutting mat here simply because I will use it. So I'm going to center it-ish. And because this is non-directional, I don't have to worry about right side up, right side down right now. I can do that later. So I'm going to glue this in place. Let's see, I'll go back just a little bit. And I'm just going to, it's not going to permeate the Tyvek, which is really nice. And I don't have to worry about it warping because the cereal box is thick enough not to warp. I don't also have to worry about going straight to the edges because I'm going to overlap it. I'm going to roll this over the edges rather than having it stop at the edges. Cut it off right here. This one is going to roll, which is why I don't have to be perfect and precise about getting my glue right up to the edge. I swear Mo must be able to hear me talk because he's going crazy out there. All right. And then I'm going to put this down. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's the beauty of this system. And then I'll press it down. And then I'll flip it over. And then, actually, I don't think I will because there's so many, because of the lace, it gives a different effect. All right, it's bumpy and I don't want to make it move. So I'm just going to press it down. This is an ice scraper, an old ice scraper, and it works great for pressing. Bone folder works, whatever you want. I just want to get a good adhesion. Then, most of the time, I would, if this was just being cut off, I would put my magnets down and I would leave it for a few minutes so that it can set. I want to make sure that the glue is good and dry because I don't want my cover lifting. You know, it's just a few extra minutes and it's worth the time to give you a more finished effect. All right, now I moved it over here. Here we go. When I wrap, I use this tool from colorwayarts.com. There are probably others. I imagine you can get something comparable on Amazon or at an art craft supply store. Not really sure. I've had this for a very long time, and that's where I got it. colorwayarts.com. And what this does is it allows me, what a mess. This allows me to make, this is why I wait for glue to dry. There's glue on that corner there. Allows me to make a mitered smooth corner every single time. I don't have to second guess myself. This works with fabric and paper. And I just take this corner, put it on the corner of my page, and then cut straight down. And I'm going to do that on all four corners. Excuse me. And you're being serenaded by Mo. There's lace and fabric there, so it's lace and paper there, so it's a little bit thicker. And that might be something you want to consider too. You know, curling corners, that was a bit thicker lace. I didn't look into that, so that might become problematic later, but nothing a little glue won't fix. All right, cut the corners off. Put this away so I don't cut myself, and that's all the cutting I need to do with that. Put this in my trimmer. Okay, then I am going to glue I'm going to roll the edges and glue them down. My preference is I roll and glue the long edges first, and I almost always score it first with my bone folder just to make sure I know where I'm going to crease it. Just run the bone folder along the edge all the way around. And then, like I said, I like to do the long edges first. Now, you can see I've got a little bit of an extra spine there. It's not going to show at all. I'll put glue on here. And when I'm doing this, I make sure to get glue right here because that's the key to getting a smooth fold. Those corner pieces, and I'll show you what I mean. All right, glue there. And because I've got a little bit of wiggle room, I'll put the glue here now too. Again, I generally wait a little bit to let the glue set after I've rolled it, but not a big deal in the least. You know what I didn't do? I got lucky. I intended, when I laid this down, to make sure, remember how I told you I made a little bit bigger spine? I should have made sure it was in the center. It's not going to matter now. It is, because it is a little, you can see it's a little bit off center. I meant to do that, darn it. Oh well. That's okay. Learn from my mistakes. So you can see in here, it should have been to the right just a little bit more. Dang nabbit. Oh, well. I meant to tell you that, but I think Mo's barking threw me off. So I'm going to roll it down, and I'll clamp it. See how right here it overlaps just a tiny bit? You want to make sure there's glue in there and that you push this down. It's a little bit thicker, so you want to make sure there's glue in here and you push it down and then you clamp. It's, just one of those days. The boys were muddy messes. They were having a dig fest in the backyard. And my dog, Hannah, she's a German Shepherd. She is the police dog. And when the boys rumble, the boys are Bob and Mo, the Bernese Mountain Dogs. When they rumble, she goes all kinds of crazy. And so she was scolding them for rumbling and making sure nobody got hurt. And they were running and digging, and oh my gosh, are they a muddy mess. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and even when we have a quote-unquote dry season, it's still a muddy mess. So those guys in the backyard is just, oof. I will mop the floors again today. All right, so I'm going to clamp that down and let it dry because this is a little bit thicker than regular paper. And then I'm going to do the same exact thing to this side. And you'll see when I fold this, it's not perfectly centered, but that's a bummer on my part. I should have double checked that. Live and learn. I meant to. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to roll and glue and press. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect because when I'm all said and done, I am going to glue down those insert plates that I showed you. Okay. The neighbors are going to hate me. And if I need a little extra glue, I'll put a little extra glue. Like I said, this is a bit thicker than norm. So, and then I'll clamp these down. The boys are indoor dogs at their house in Boise, so when they get outside for any length of time, they go nuts. I mean, yes, they go out for walks and all, and they play in the yard a little bit, but for the most part, they are inside. But they're such a muddy mess right now, I didn't want to bring them in. Okay, and then I'll clamp or push that down, and I'll push this down over here. And I'm going to give that just a second to dry so you can see. This is what the cover is going to look like, and you can see where the fold is going to be. Darn it, I'm angry with myself for doing that. And let's see, it goes this way, so this will end up being the front. Oh no, that'll be pretty. That'll be right at the edge. Not a big deal. Grand scheme of things, not a big deal. I can always put a charmed angle on this side so it'll look like it's deliberately off center. In fact, I might do that. I think I will. I'll put an eyelet right here and then dangle a charm. That's one of the things I had intended to make with the scraps and offcuts and leftover bits. And if I put that there, it'll look like I intentionally moved it to the side so you could still see the lace and hang a charm. There's almost always a fix. Okay. Then I want this to dry. And then I'm going to close in the ends. I'm just going to leave the rest of them there because I can. And I want to make sure, before I fold the ends down, I want to make sure that this corner piece is tucked tight and that this corner piece is tucked tight. That's what gives you the smooth finish. Okay, so I'll glue that, folding it down, and then I will clamp that. And it's paper to paper, so it clamps pretty well and it stays pretty well. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And then I wanted to double check, make sure this piece is down and this piece. I just keep baby wipes here, so when I get glue on my bone folder, I can easily and quickly take it off because that happens more often than not. Okay. And then I'll clamp these. You can see I made a little glue spill there, but it's not going to show, so it doesn't really matter. Oh no, that's just this. It's not glue. That's the edge of the paper. Okay, and that is the front of the cover. So once everything is dry, here is my spine insert, and I'll show you next how to make that. And here are the, where did I put them? Well, they're around somewhere. I move them to the side. Here they are. And here are the inside book pages. So I would, when I'm ready, I'll glue this piece down, and then I'll glue, this is directional, so I'll glue this on top here, and this on top here, and then my journal is ready for me to use. Now remember, I haven't decided how I'm going to close this, if I'm going to put a button on the top, or if I'm going to put string, or what I'm going to do. Before I glue these in, I will make my determination, because if I want to run, you know, a piece of ribbon along here to tie it in the front, then I want to make sure that I have it between my layers. So keep that in mind. And we're going to call this good enough. It should be plenty dry by now. Yeah, he's standing right outside the window and barking because he can hear me talking to you. Doesn't like being alone. He gets sad and lonely. Okay. And just like that. And let's see, I said because of the direction of the paper. Go like this. Now, ink too. I am partial to ink. Now you can see here how it buckles a little bit. If that's happening because of the thickness of the lace. So what I'll do is I'll just take a little divot out right there at the intersection so that it doesn't buckle like that. And it's going to be covered by the piece that I put on the inside, so it really truly doesn't matter. That'll just allow it to lay a little bit flatter. Something to keep in mind. Sometimes with thinner paper, you don't really need to do that. It'll lay in its spot nicely, but sometimes it helps. So you can see how it buckles here. It's because this paper's a little bit thicker. I used card for that center piece of the spine, and now it won't buckle. See, because of the way I fold, it's not going to buckle. And here, and I'll put a little extra glue right there, and here. Let's make sure that's down. Yep, those are all down and good. Okay, and it doesn't matter if it's a little bit of a mess because it is. Sorry, I'm going to wipe off my fingers. Doesn't matter if it's a little bit of a mess. It's going to be in the inside on the bottom, and it is not going to show. And you can see here, this is coming up just a little bit, so I'll put a little bit of extra glue. Okay. All right, then I'm done with this. I can move that away. And here we are. All right. So I guess I do have to decide kind of if I'm going to show you how to do this. Well, while this is completely drying, I'll put a few more clamps on there. While this is completely drying, I'll show you how to make the spine insert. You cover the front and back covers the exact same way. You lay the chipboard right on your paper. You use this trimmer to angle your corners, and you fold it just exactly like we just did. The center one is slightly different because you're not folding these two pieces. And the way I do it is this. Here's some scratch paper, and I said we'll use this one. All right. Okay, I'm going to put a bit of that Tyvek on it. Let's see where I put the Tyvek. Here it is. All right, so I'm going to cut the Tyvek to the length. And I'm going to cut the Tyvek a little bit wider. And the reason I'm going to do that is because this is where the hinge is going to lay in the book. So, and it doesn't, the exact measurement really and truly doesn't matter. But I'll cut it a little bit wider. So let's say 3.5, 4 inches, whatever it is. You just want it wider. And this one, you can see there's a little bit of the fold from the cereal box. So I'm going to trim that down just a smidge. I don't want that crease in there. So this is my spine insert. And the way I'm going to do this is I will lay this right on top like this. Just like that. And glue it down. It's not going to show. My granddaughter was here for a couple days and she likes Honey Nut Cheerios. So I got her some of those. All right, and I glue that piece on there with wings. There's a couple little wings. And again, I would do the same thing. I'd do this and let it dry for a minute. All right. Then I am going to get my paper. And let's see, is this one long enough? Nope, not quite. So here, I'll just use this. These are just offcut scrap pieces of paper. And I'm going to, I want it, look at the orientation. So I want my flowers to go up and down. And this one's got this brown at the edges, and I can trim that off because I don't want it to be in the wrong spot because I don't want it to not look like an edge. That didn't make sense. I don't want the edge piece to be where it shouldn't be when I'm making this spine. All right, flip it over, flip this down. Again, it's non-directional, so it doesn't matter. I am going to put my Tyvek covered chipboard right there, kind of in the center. Can you see? Let's maybe angle this a little bit differently. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put adhesive on this. Doesn't have to be perfect because it's going to be covered and it's not going to show. Okay. Tyvek piece, glued it down. Now I'm going to trim just this edge off because that's longer than I need. And I'll save that scrap because I'll be able to use it for something. And I will get this. Now, I told you I did the long sides first, right? Not when I'm doing this. I don't actually fold in the long sides. So I'll cut this. I'm going to still cut my 4 corners. And you can see it's longer over here, so I'm just kind of keeping it that angle. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be completely covered. It won't show. Okay. And last one. And again, the Tyvek just makes the seam stronger where it folds over. I don't have to worry about it tearing. All right. Okay, now the only place I glue is right here and right here. Just like that, okay? And I'll glue both of those down and I'll put a little bit in those corners so that they get that nice neat edge. I'm gluing the top and the bottom of the journal. There are teeth on these, and what I do is I run an emery board. When I get these, I run an emery board. For those who haven't, some of you know this already, I run an emery board like this through it, and what that does is it gets rid of the teeth, so it doesn't make teeth marks in the paper. Okay, and again here, glue this down. Just like this. Make sure those corner pieces are glued down, and I'm just going to let it dry. All right, so I'm just letting that dry. I will fold this up and this up and this back and this back. That is going to be, here it is, my centerpiece. This is what it's going to look like. This is the base to sew in these signature inserts. All right. And the next step is I use a friction pen, which is a heat-sensitive pen, right? Friction, F-R-I-X-I-O-N, by Pilot, erasable pen to make my straight lines. And I make straight lines because I don't sew straight, but you can see these are perfectly lined up, So this should be done by now. I use the grid on my paper, and I usually use, I'm going to move it off to the side well, no, I won't. It doesn't matter. To make sure that it's straight, I normally use the top and bottom grids. And then I'll use my magnets, or I could use some removable tape to hold them down so that I know I'm creating a straight line. Then I take a straight edge and my friction line. I'm going to use a longer one so I can make sure my straight edge is straight because I have a bit of a space down at the bottom. And I mark the center line first, top to bottom. And I just make a straight line down, just like that. And then I move it over 1/4 of an inch. My ruler has 1/4 of an inch markings. And so that makes it easy. I just line my 1/4 of an inch mark up on my previous line, and then I make another. And so I do that for, let's see, this one is almost 2 inches. I start in the center. It's not quite 2, so I'll do it 7. I'll make 7 of these because I don't want a signature right at the curve. So I'm going to do 3 on each side of the center line. If you have a wider spine, you can do more. If you have a narrower spine, you do less. get to pick. See? So it looks like that. Then what I do, because I'm right-handed, I flip it around, I line it up again, and I make the rest of the marks. Same way. Then I take scraps, these kind of scraps, and I make sure it's about a 1/2 inch less. It can be 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, but you see here, in case something is up off the top of the page or down below the bottom of the page, I want my page spines to be a little bit smaller, narrower than the edges of my pages. Now you can go top to bottom, but there's 2 reasons I do it this way. 1, it helps me line them up straight when I sew it, and 2, it allows me flexibility with what sticks out the top and what sticks out the bottom. So I prefer them slightly smaller than the page itself. And then I take some of these scraps, and let's say I said that was 5, so let's just do 4.5, just for the sake of ease. I'll take a scrap and I'll cut it at 4.5, and then I generally do 1.5 inches. You can do 1 works just fine. I've done 1 many, many times, but I like 1.5 because most of the time my page will be something like this. Here, the Tyvek will show you. My page will be something like this, and I wrap it around. So that gives me more space to glue it in place. So I've got more real estate here to make sure that my page is glued where I want it to be. So I've got 3/4 inch. And then I use, when I'm putting my pages in, I use this, which is an old knitting needle, to make sure that I've got the same spacing all the way along. So I just put this in, put my page in, and then I glue it down. And then it's not impeding the fold, and it's not uneven. I don't have to worry about it being uneven. You can use a ruler too. When you glue yours down, you know, it's easy to do. You just lay it flat and you put your 1/4 inch ruler, and then you glue your first page to that edge, right? You take, here, it's hard to see paper on paper, but you take your paper and you just put it up to that edge and you glue. And then you know that your seam is straight each time. So take a scrap, right? Fold it in half. You can score it if you choose. This was pretty easy to fold in half because it doesn't have to be perfect. And the reason it doesn't have to be perfect is because you're putting paper over the top. It's not going to show. So as you can see, I didn't fold it perfectly. It doesn't matter. Then I take a straight edge and a pencil and I open it back up. I lay this into the fold that I've just created when I folded it over. And then I take a pencil, and that gives me a clearly visible line in the center where I want to sew it. Now, whether I'm sewing with a sewing machine or I'm using a 5-hole pamphlet stitch, doesn't make any difference. It allows me to line it up exactly where I want. I do this with the number of hinges I need for the number of lines I've got. So however, how many signature pieces I want to put in. Each one of these gives you at least 2 signatures, because you remember, you can add fold outs and flip outs on each page. So you get at least 2 pages or 2 sides per half of the flap. So you get a minimum of 4 for each one of these inserts. And then, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you can see better. Then I take a piece of tacky tape, or low tack tape. Sorry, that's really up close and personal. But I take a piece of low tack tape. I'll turn this on the side and I lay this here. Now the first one, I measure. I'll take my ruler and say, okay, there's a 1/4 inch there and a 1/4 inch there. I just do that on my very first one so that I know it's mostly centered. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, I want it to be mostly centered. And then I look to the right and to the left to make sure that I'm okay. Then I open it up and I can see, look, I don't know how well you can see, but right there, it's off just a little bit. It allows me to move it down or move it in place, right? Exactly where I want it. And then I take my low tack tape and I tape it down. Now I can use my 5-hole pamphlet stitch. And what I do when I do a 5-hole pamphlet stitch is I'll take a template. Here would be a template. Okay, I'll cut this to size. It's 5 inches. Oh, this one doesn't have a 5-inch mark on it. My old trimmer I marked it at 5 inches. Okay, so I'll make it 5 inches, right? I'll make a template if I'm using a pamphlet stitch. When I'm using a sewing machine, I don't. I just make the stitch wider. So I've got this piece right here, and it's 5 inches. I'm going to start in the middle, so at 2.5. I'll start at 2.5, and then I'll go 3.5 and 4.5, and then because of the size, yours may vary based on what you need. So you can see there I've got the marks. Then I will take you can use the one that comes in the kit, you can use a Tim Holtz punch, it doesn't really matter. And I will punch a hole right next to it in the center of that spine. I'll fold it down and punch my holes. And that's going to be my template if I'm using the 5-hole pamphlet stitch. Let me zoom back out a little bit. And if it's off a fraction of a millimeter, who cares? I mean, it's not going to show and it's not going to be obvious. So I've got my holes, I've got my template, and I would match this up right on top, right? I would match the lines up right on top, and I can do the same thing. Take a piece of purple tape and put it down. Then I can poke my holes right there and sew in my signature. I use a sewing machine. Then for the next one, let's cut one more just to show you what I mean. For the next one, I use that as my guide. So let's see, I usually cut them all at once, but you know, I didn't here, so let's go. And 1.5. Okay, so there's my next one. I do the same exact thing. Fold, so you can see it really is quick. Fold, you don't have to use a bone folder. I'm gonna use my ruler. I just push it up against this to make sure that it's straight. Open it, put a line, and I've got my line right down the center, and that makes it super easy. One of the reasons that I do it this way is I like the flexibility of being able to change my pages as I go, but I also like that I can use this exact same thing to line it up. So I will take my ruler, right, and make sure that they touch each other. Let's see, there we go. I'll make sure that they touch each other so that I know they're even at the top and bottom. And then I'll open it up. Remember this one, the first one would be sewn in already. I'll open this up and I've got my line and I can just continue the line. See, by having this mark at the top and the bottom, I can make sure that they're straight, right? I can butt them up like this and I continue the line to make sure they're straight that way. Then I just reuse this tape. Okay, my first one is sewn in. I'll put this in place and now I'm ready to sew in my second one. Same thing, line this up. If I'm using the 5-hole pamphlet stitch, line it up, poke, 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 sew, 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 or take it to my machine and sew it straight down the line. And I do that all the way across, the exact same thing. Using this as a guide to start and stop your pieces helps you keep things really straight. And so you can see here that this is really, really straight. Then I've got all these pieces. I'm ready to go. I can do my pages when I want to do my pages. And to remove these lines, it's going to be loud for just a moment, so I apologize. You may want to turn your volume down for just a minute. I'll show you what to do this because this is heat sensitive. You can use an iron, but you can also use your heat gun. You can use your hairdryer. So I'll show you what I mean. So turn your volume down if you don't want to hear it. Okay, you can turn your volume back up if you want. That's off. And you can see all of those lines are completely gone. There are no more lines to show. Remember, this isn't going to show because you're going to have pages covering it. You're going to have pages that will cover that. So your signature, your pencil mark in here won't show unless you want it to. You can do this double-sided if you choose, or you can come in and after you're all done, if you want ink, you put some ink in here and what have you. But it's not going to show. So there you go. That is how you create this type of a journal. Now I didn't glue everything together, but I'll piece it all together and show you. This is plenty dry by now. And again, oh, you know what I was going to do? I said I would put a hole here, and I'm going to do that, and I'll show you why. I don't even want to know how long this is because it's going to be painful. But it's the entire process, and it's kind of important. So you can see I didn't center it. So what I'm going to do is put a hole near the top, and because this is nice and thick, I can easily put a large eyelet through that. Okay, I'm going to use my crocodile, but you can use whatever system you want. I'm going to punch a hole here near the edge, but not right at the edge, so that it can wrap around, right? And then I will grab an eyelet. I use a spring-loaded eyelet setter, and it's very loud because that's my favorite because it gives me a smooth back. It gives me a flowered back, so I won't spring it. But you can see now I can hang a dangle from this, and it'll look like I intentionally, oh shoot, I did that right on. Okay, that was not brilliant. It's right there on the edge. I meant to move it over just a smidge, but because the paper's there, well, all right, maybe I'll go with plan. Let's see, how can I fix this? It's too close to the edge. You know what? No, it's not. It'll work. It'll work just fine. Once I set this, it'll work just fine. And that'll allow me to have it a wider one that'll dangle a little bit to the front and a little bit to the side. And again, that'll look like I intentionally offset my spine. So there's that. And then I'll decide if I wanted to put a button right here as a closure. This is the front. Maybe not because it'll be right on the lace, but I certainly could. Let's see, where's a button closure? Here's a button closure. I could do a button closure like this, right? I put a piece of Tyvek, sew the button on. Ooh, let's move in a little bit. There we go. Put the button on and then use an eyelet in the back and just wrap it around like that, super fast. I could put the string or, not string, sorry, silk or ribbon or something. You know what? Where's that vintage ribbon that I moved to the side? I could use that one if I wanted to. If I want the pink. Well, this one's not super long. This one's not super long. Let's see. I'd have to iron it. But I could run this through the middle like this. That's a little grungier than this is. I like the grunge, but I don't think it suits this so well. But I could run this down the side and put it. So whatever I decide with the closure, I will decide before I put the front and back pieces together, just to give myself options. So I'll decide on that. And then I glue in this. Make sure it's the right side up. If it's directional paper, I'll glue in this and I'll clamp back into center. Sorry. Glue this in, let it dry for a few minutes. Make sure that I've got my creases at the creases of my fold, right? And that it's centered. Don't do what I did out here unless you want to alter it. And then I'll take the front and back pages, glue those down, clamp those on, and then my journal is ready to decorate. Again, I apologize for the change in direction, so it probably wasn't as clear, because usually I plan these well out in advance, and I kind of just punted with this. And for the Mo interruptions, because boy, is he a barkety guy today. Please watch the other viewers. There's going to be so many great ideas, so much great inspiration. Do check out Rachel's videos as she goes over a lot more information in detail than I did. And purchase the kit because it's gorgeous. If you like this kind of a pattern, this is a phenomenal kit. And there will be, oops, right here, there will be our tiny little fun journal. So you can see, easy to do, just a little bit time consuming. But once you know how to do it, it's pretty simple and you can use what you have on hand. I probably would, because I'm me, sew around the edge, but you don't have to. You can see here with this rolled over edge and the top like this, you really truly don't have to sew around unless you want to. And then it would just look like this, right? just like that. Okay, take care. I hope everyone is well and that you're enjoying a beautiful spring. Thank you for watching and happy creating.